we warned you that we're not the best at picking games, but we are still going to soldier forward, even though we went 0-3 last week. Each of us gave you a game that we felt really good about. What do you have a very strong feeling about? We'll start with you, Stephen Godfrey.
I don't feel good about it. I don't feel good about it at all.
This is the College Football Enquirer, and I want to remind you before we get started, if you would like to see us in all our glory, turn on your TV. Look at the home screen. I bet you're seeing the Yahoo Sports Network. It is on all leading fast services. That is free ad-supported television. That is, you turn on your smart TV, your home screen pops up, and you have all those icons. Look for the Yahoo Sports Network. You can watch us. You can watch Yahoo Sports Daily. You can watch all the incredible programming from the Yahoo Sports Network. Also, if you want to watch us on your tablet, on your phone, on the go, 24/7, yahoosports.tv. You can watch all of the great shows from the Yahoo Sports Network, including this here College Football Enquirer. And now let us discuss week 2. I'm Andy Staples. He is Yahoo's Ross Dellinger. He is Stephen Godfrey of Phantom Island and a lot of other things. Gentlemen, we've got Bryce Underwood headed to Oklahoma. Michigan, Oklahoma. It's Sharon Moore's game against his alma mater. When they worked the suspension out with the NCAA, they made sure he's not suspended for this game. His suspension starts next week. But I think all eyes are going to be on this quarterback who's going to play against a notoriously confusing defense, because this is kind of the story of college football now. And Ross, I'm curious to get your opinion on this. So Bryce Underwood, #1 recruit in the country, Belleville, Michigan, but he was not committed to Michigan. He was committed to LSU for the longest time. And then shortly before National Signing Day, we find out he's flipping to Michigan, and it involves the second richest person in the world. It involves happy wife, happy life. And it involves... well, that's pretty much it. But it's amazing.
Yeah, it is. It's an amazing story. And one of those stories that sort of came out of this last year of the NIL era before we jump into rev share, where you have basically everybody just cleaning out their collective, front loading all these deals, searching for their biggest booster to donate as much money as possible to basically buy a roster. And before the new enforcement entity arrives on July 1. So we saw a lot of places do this. We talked about, I think, the last pod, LSU. They have a big booster in California that they sort of went to raise their money. And so everybody's kind of got their guy or guys, and Michigan went to Larry Ellison, the big booster, whose wife is
but Larry Ellison is not a big Michigan
guy,
booster,
right?
Larry Ellison is
his wife,
Illinois grad.
Yep, that's right. That's right. His wife, a big Michigan booster and alum, I believe, right? And so the wife was sort of behind a lot of it. I think it's pretty obvious, right? He funded most of what sort of went to Bryce Underwood, which was allegedly, what was it, Andy? What was the
reportedly $10 million,
figure.
I believe, over a 3-year period. I'm not sure if it's a 4-year deal or a 3-year deal.
Yeah.
I think the assumption is he goes to the NFL after 3 years, so I believe it's a 3-year deal. Also, Dave Portnoy of Barstool, who we talked about last week and we'll probably talk about again this week, was tangentially involved in this as well, helping connect Larry Ellison and his bride with the folks at Michigan. I want to point out, Godfrey, one of my favorite parts of this story. So Larry Ellison, founder of Oracle, very rich guy, one of the titans of the software industry, second richest man in the world. The tech press, whose job it is to cover people like this, were not even aware that he was married until the press release from Michigan's Collective came out, thanking him and his wife for their generous donation to the Collective.
So secret wife and secret boosterdom. I imagine in those circles in Silicon Valley where you can't spend your money strangely enough, that this was something that caught them by surprise. If you follow the tech press at all, these people are as eccentric as you could find in the American economic ruling class. And yet, I'm sure this shocked people across the tech world. And also, just as someone who kind of made his way in investigative journalism early on in my career on the booster doings under the table, this felt like the end for me. This felt like, all right, this story we've now reached the conclusion. I remember last year, the Wall Street Journal and Rachel Bachman's story came out and kind of had the what we used to call in the journalism business a TikTok before there was an app named that on how this came together. It felt very much like if you read a piece in the Wall Street Journal about how a corporate merger took place or how like a large film was financed, maybe. You know, you had a couple celebrities come in, you had to woo the A-list talent, you had to find the funding, you were worried about the deal, something changed, you know, in the 11th hour. This was so above board and so corporate in its nature that it just felt like the logical conclusion to all of those decades and years of handshake agreements, $5,000 in cash in a duffel bag, or I'm going to get your dad a job down at the local factory. This is the conclusion of where that started.
Now they're doing that in the NBA
circle.
now, by the way. If you
they are. Yeah,
heard Pablo Torre found out.
Yeah.
Apparently, that's but that only involves the sixth richest man in the world, Steve Ballmer, the owner of the Clippers. Larry Ellison has him eclipsed by several $billion. But Jolynn is the name of Larry Ellison's wife, who was thanked in the press release from the Champion Circle Collective last November when this flip was announced, and it is amazing to me. Like, this is how college football works. Like, so this lady went to Michigan, huge Michigan football fan, really, really wants Michigan to do well, happens to have married a billionaire, and is like, hey, hubby, this is pocket change to you. Can you just slide the QB a few $1 million and it'll make me very happy.
There's somewhere a yacht was not purchased. So somewhere multiple helicopters were not leased. Actually, you probably lease a lot of helicopters for this. I'm not really in the helicopter business.
Larry Ellison probably has Airwolf at his disposal if he really wants it.
But this was hands down the best ask I've ever heard from like a disgustingly affluent human being. I would like this quarter. How much do you think he knew about Michigan football before 2 years ago? How much
This is a man who goes and watches tennis in person.
Yeah. I'm saying, like, if you gave him a quiz and you were like, name the 10 most relevant Michigan players of the last 20 years. Do you like where do you think he knows? He still might not know. Do you think he knows who like Denard Robinson is?
No, I don't think he knows who Denard Robinson is. I don't think he knows that he didn't tie his shoes. But meanwhile, his wife sounds like the kind of person who is breaking down the two deep and wants to know how whether the right guard is going to be able to hold off the second stringer because he's really coming on in practice.
Yeah, she's been like irrationally mad about something to do with college football on MGO blog. Like, she probably has a username on MGO blog.
I love the MGO blog people. I do want to. They have
that makes one of us
for years predicted all of this. And if you've never read MGO blog, go. It's fun. It is one of the most erudite college football fan communities you will ever see. You will feel probably much dumber having read it not because they're dumb, but because they're so much smarter than you, and they'll tell you. But
agree to disagree, but keep going.
But I have enjoyed their prediction for years that if ever we decided to get down in the mud with the SEC schools, we would fire the money cannon. And by God, they didn't fire the money cannon. They fired the money Death Star.
Here's my question. Why, ethically, if you're so much intellectually, if you're so intellectually superior to the rest of us idiots down south, why did you not help these poor athletes years ago? Were you that steadfast and true about observing some sort of ethical rule of law? I mean, come on, guys. If you had all this damn money, like, where was it? I will say, this sets a market. Yeah,
they were not cheating.
They don't cheat at Michigan. No, they don't cheat at Michigan. No. They don't do that. They do not manipulate the parameters by which we operate in this game to create an advantage for themselves. They would not do that.
They were waiting for this to be above board.
That's right.
And that's when
they don't seek to change how we compete in this game in fairness. They don't do those things. at all, ever. Michigan men don't do that. Michigan men don't do that.
I detect a little sarcasm.
They don't have national titles. Tainted. They don't have national titles won in which their head coach was present like a third of the time as if it was a mob no-show job. Okay?
He was only
that would never
suspended
happen.
for 6 of the 15 games, Godfrey. Come on.
That would never happen, guys. Come on. This is Michigan we're talking about. This is not Ohio State or the SEC. They wouldn't do such a thing. Let me veer out of the skid here. I'm happy that they're setting the market this high. I'm happy that, regardless of their, let's say it's ethically gross and completely naive and out of touch, maybe has a representation of their economic standing in the world, not understanding how the working class lives or works or poor places in America. Aside from that, I'm happy that Michigan
ethically
fans,
gross? What is ethically gross about paying someone market
No.
value?
I'm saying. Oh no. I'm saying it. I'm saying that's good. I'm saying for years they really railed. It's so funny because this fan base really railed against paying players. The $5,000 handshake or the $20 handshake or whatever.
Maybe they
for
just
years.
didn't like the suppression of market value by the rules. Maybe
Maybe they just wanted a tax write-off, I mean, look, you talk about loss leaders. I'm happy that they have come out aggressively and set the market because
loss leaders and best.
This Underwood storyline, I feel like, Ross, kind of cascaded through the rest of college football's elite. I feel like the rest of the halves, the helmet schools, as I call them, of college football sort of had to wake up and take notice. And yes, I will acknowledge, this is a Southern panel here. This was a smack back in the face to, it happened to be LSU. It's not specifically about LSU, guys, but this was a slap back in the face to the Southeastern Conference, who excelled at recruiting in the margins for 20 years. And this, I felt like, was sort of a reprimand.
Well, we mentioned, LSU earlier about how they built their roster and went out and got, their big California donor and all that. All of that happened in the few weeks after Bryce Underwood decommitted. I think it was sort of like, I think one person used it to me as sort of like a wake-up call of, we have to do more. We've got to pay more, and we've got to go out and raise more money to directly pay players if we're going to sort of play in this game. So I think it showed them like a sort of firsthand this new world, and that was their reaction. Right over the next couple months, I think they raised like $10 to $12 million over just a very short span, directly for the collective and for players for the front loading.
It's sort of like, when the mob controls something that's illegal, and then it gets legalized, and the multinational conglomerates show up, and you realize how puny the mob really is.
Yeah, this is Ross. I want to go back to the LSU story you wrote. I know we're talking about Michigan, but they did it above board. They did it with a big number, and all tongue out of cheek here for a second. I'm glad they did. I think it's good for Michigan. I think it's good to restore some balance to this sport because the SEC had sort of tipped the scales in a ridiculous manner. But I have a hard time, Ross. Like, you've reported this, other people have reported this. Let's take LSU, for instance. But I know this also happened at Alabama from talking to some individuals there. It's just really hard to digest this concept like, we just didn't really understand NIL. We didn't really understand player compensation. How could you have been so flat-footed in your receiving of this seismic change in college sports? I'm not doubting what you're reporting. I'm saying, like, you've brought this. Several other people have brought this. I had Alabama people who work on their NIL tell me this face-to-face. And it's hard not to say, what? Like, how did you screw this? Like, how did you not? How was this not prepared for? Right?
Yeah, I think it is fascinating and we're going to look back years from now too, on 2021, 22, and 23, sort of that 3-year NIL era, and look at the schools that were really aggressive and how it paid off or not for them, and the schools that like set back and really thought, we're going to try our best to play by some rules. And I think there was that. I think a lot of those schools were trying to be, quote, right, good, and play
when
by
they
the
didn't
rules
realize there's nothing morally wrong about paying someone what they're worth.
And there's no rules, right? There like really isn't any enforcement of rules, so there's no reason to play by any rules because they don't exist. But I think another part of this, guys, and I know we talked about this like on the last pod crew for a while, is like there were boosters who forever at certain schools were told, like, you can't do these things. Like, this is illegal. Don't do them.
Yeah.
And they were now told, you can do them now, right?
Yeah.
You can do them. And they were like, well, wait a second. Are you sure? Right. And I just think there was a lot of miscommunication there. And then there's like a third part of this, which I don't want to get into too deeply, but we all sort of know, like, most of the boosters look a certain way at many of the schools.
Oh, I'll get into that.
And they're being asked to directly pay a 17, 18, and 19-year-old who don't look like them at all.
See, that was always my working theory at the height of the, whatever we want to call it, Bagman era or whatever, was that if you actually stamp this out, you would hinder race relations even more in a lot of red states in America, because you had a semi-affluent white, upper middle class interacting directly with a poor black middle or lower class. These relationships were fostered over generations, especially in the South. It's funny. Yeah, I think certainly, look, racial dynamics play into all of this. And now that it's above board, you get agents involved, you get lawyers, suddenly everybody's on their best behavior. I have a working theory here, Ross. Michigan, as an alumni base, they're rich. They got a lot of money.
Yeah.
And there's a thing, especially in the South, we all know this if you're from a small town, they're sort of cul-de-sac rich. They're semi-affluent, but you're not really rich. You're not old money rich.
They got a McMansion.
You got
and
it.
The Michigan people have actual mansions.
Just because you're running
estates.
you may have an extremely successful jet ski dealership or whatever, towing company, okay? That's a certain level of rich. And I think what caught the South flat-footed was you used to be a big swinging you-know-what if all of a sudden you could offer a kid $5,000 in cash. But when we go to actual rate, actual value, when we go to market value, and as Andy said, when we take it above board, these quarterbacks are worth millions. They're not worth tens of thousands of dollars. So all of a sudden, certain corners of the South who fancied themselves affluent, or they were doing some sort of, what I always heard from bagmen for years was like they fancied themselves Robin Hood. When in actuality, what they were doing was they were thriving in a really, really suppressed market for the labor class. Because yes, you're giving them $5,000 illegally by NCAA standards to go play for your school. They're not worth $5,000. They're worth exponentially more than that. And schools with real money like Michigan and Texas were ready for this in a way that the Deep South wasn't.
I would agree with that. But here's the other part with Michigan, and this is where we'll bring it back to the football field.
If we must.
Michigan could not throw last year. Michigan did not have quarterbacks on its roster who could complete passes down the field. It was pretty hideous to watch until it became beautiful in the USC game when they ran a 2-minute drive without throwing the ball. I've never seen it happen. I've never seen a team march down the field in a 2-minute drive, only running the ball. Even service academies don't do that, but Michigan had no choice, and they did it. But it is not sustainable when you aspire to win national championships, as Michigan just did 2 years ago. And they needed someone who could come in and throw the ball, and they needed it to happen immediately. And it happened to be that the best high school quarterback in America was in their backyard. And so they go get him. And now he has to be the guy, because they've paid him all this money, to bring them a passing game, even though they didn't actually really appreciably improve their receiver group. But that's neither here nor there. You go into the maw, into Norman, Oklahoma, where Brent Venables runs a very complex defense that is designed to fool the opposing quarterback. And you're going to put this true freshman in there. And I am fascinated to see what happens in this game, because on the other side, you've got the now what seems more traditional, the rental quarterback who was developed somewhere else, John Mateer, who came from Washington State, but he's got starting experience. Like, he already knows how this all works. It's gonna be so much fun on Saturday night.
Well, Andy, it's a good point about like this all happening after Michigan had a 7-win year where they struggled passing the ball. Like, it's amazing what happens when you're bad on the field and how that can lead to or trigger boosters to sort of take action. I'm reminded of last year when Mississippi State lost at home to Toledo. You guys remember? And I think it was the next week, Mississippi State announced an $8 million donation. I think the single biggest donation from one individual that went directly to the roster, basically. So there's a reason behind that. I think somebody told me there, obviously it's my alma mater, so somebody did tell me there that, it was supposed to be like $4 million, and they did some convincing at the end. The person who remained anonymous wrote the check for $8 million and said, "I don't want to lose to Toledo again." So it's just amazing.
Yeah, dude, this is a great fundraising strategy.
Yeah.
We got to start tanking games. If you're on the mid-level right now and you're listening to this, right? If you're a booster, maybe you have like a mid-level P4, what are the middle two we call it or whatever. Go out there and lose to the MAC, because apparently you'll get another check for it. Like, this is a great
Kentucky
strategy.
blew it by beating Toledo. What were they thinking?
Man. They've got to save for the buyout. Let's be honest.
They're not paying that buyout.
No, they can't. I've never seen.
That's
Andy,
another
I've never
show
seen
for
a
another
buyout.
day. When the buyout's all due within 30 to 60 days, you ain't paying it.
There ain't enough coal in them hills, boys.
So the other part is, and I kind of want to transition with this, but the other piece of this is the person who connected the Ellisons with Michigan was Barstool founder Dave Portnoy, proud Michigan man, blah, blah, blah. We talked about him last week. He was banned from the Big Ten stadiums for Big Noon Kickoff, which he is now a commentator on, but will be welcomed by the Big 12. They're going to the Cyhawk game, Iowa versus Iowa State in Ames this week. And Brett Yormark, the commissioner of the Big 12, is welcoming Dave Portnoy with open arms. And Jamie Pollard, the Iowa State athletic director, said, "We're not Ohio State." To which Ross Bjork, the Ohio State AD, goes, hey, that was just Fox.
Mm-hmm.
Which I'm like, okay, if it's just Fox, why does Fox not seem to mind this happening in the Big 12? I would think the person Fox hired, Fox would like to be in every stadium. So I'm struggling to believe that.
Yeah, it's and I know we beat this in the ground last week, but it's pretty clear. And I think I said this last week, like when this was announced back in July, and not just Ohio State, but a few others in the Big Ten, right? They weren't like super thrilled about this. So it's pretty clear. And now we saw, with the Big 12, the kind of the approach the Big 12's taking, which I think to a degree, there's some people out there that are sort of saying, this is the approach to take, right? Lean into it, like have fun. This is sort of like, the new America where you can just say and do anything, it seems. So like just kind of lean into it. But obviously there's a pretty large segment of people who are very turned off by sort of Barstool and Dave Portnoy's, whole thing, right? And so those people, and I can just see in the responses to my post yesterday about the Big 12 ADs meeting with Portnoy and sort of opening the door for him to do basically sort of whatever he wants on their campuses, that there is sort of a split on what people think of that. It's like, you shouldn't be doing that with this person in this company. Or then there's a lot of people that are saying, hey, lean into this more. This is the way to sort of approach it. I don't know what the right answer is, but certainly if you're Dave Portnoy, and we talked about this last week, when you get the pushback and the attention, any pushback, any attention, any acceptance like the Big 12, it's just attention. It just builds your brand more and more.
That has always been a fascinating theory to me, that any attention, any press is good press. I think, look, I know there's a lot of resistance to Barstool and there's a lot of resistance to Portnoy, and for good reason, understandable reasons I certainly support. This doesn't come down to a morality play. I think it comes down to the fact that Brett Yormark, and pretty much everything he's done and the way he's approached expanding the Big 12 brand, was to close a financial gap. He's not in this for press. He's not in this to make it cool. He's not in this for WWE title belts and Jay-Z collaborations.
It's let's make life easier for Fox.
Yes. So they'll
please keep paying us money to televise our games.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't want people to fall into the morality trap of should he be associating with Barstool. I think you can answer that question without really thinking about the Big 12. That shouldn't change things. The way to look at this is that they're just desperate to close a financial gap, and they're willing to ignore the moral reservations or objections of some of their membership. It's funny to think about the Big 12 because, my gosh, does that really represent a wide swath of ideologies, university makeups, just portions of our country, right? I mean, you think about the different representations that you've got at play in that group of schools. It doesn't shock me, Ross, that some members would say sure, and some members would have serious reservations against it. This is just a money play. This is all this is. And the Big 12 will continue to make money plays because they have tasked their executive leadership with being as aggressive as possible in finding forms of revenue to compete with the Big Two. That's it, and that's all.
Yeah, for sure. They're the ones that, and we've seen the Big 12 do a lot of this, right? They're doing some things that the Big 10 and SEC don't need to do and probably don't necessarily want to do, but we see the Big 12 and to a degree the ACC doing it because they're trying to catch up financially. And the Big 12 has been very aggressive. Its commissioner has been very aggressive. I think its presidents and athletic administrators have directed the commissioner to be very direct, Brett Yormark. I mean, that's where they originally really hired him, to be aggressive, to be sort of creative and innovative and all these things. And we've seen some of this stuff like not work out, like they talked about playing games in Mexico, and we saw that sort of, for now at least, isn't happening. And I saw this morning they struck like a new sponsorship deal with Allstate. Again, it's not renaming the league as they at first thought they might get to that point of actually being the Allstate 12, but it is just it's another side.
Maybe the Allstate
partnership.
16. I mean, isn't it time if you're gonna sell your league name, you may as well correct the mathematical imbalance.
I don't want to derail the show, but would anyone here care if they had a corporate sponsor as their main actual name?
Absolutely not.
I think we all grew up in NASCAR country. Maybe that's part of it. Bring back cigarettes. Like, make it the Marlboro 12. Camel Light.
All right. When we come back, another quarterback NIL story, but very different. But also involving a very big out-of-conference game this week that I cannot wait to tune into. We'll talk Darian Mensah and Duke, which play Illinois when we come back. Welcome back to the College Football Enquirer. We talked one quarterback NIL story that will affect this week's games. Let's talk about a different one. This one, Ross wrote, went to Duke and visited with Darian Mensah, who is the quarterback who transferred from Tulane, had a wonderful first year as a starter at Tulane, and then very quickly headed to Duke. It was, guys, I'll set the table here. Duke wins 9 games last year. The transfer portal opens. And one of the first names we hear when the transfer portal opens is that Malik Murphy, last year's Duke starting quarterback, has entered the transfer portal. And you're thinking, okay, Malik Murphy, who transferred from Texas, they won 9 games last year. He threw something like 32 touchdown passes. What is going on here? Well, about 48 hours later, we understand why, because Darian Mensah is headed to Duke. And Ross, you met up with Darian. You talked to his mom, who sounds like a pretty incredible person. How did this all come together?
Yeah, it's pretty wild story. I was kind of fascinated by it last year when some of the amounts for his deal were sort of released or leaked out, right? That it was around $4 million, or at least with incentives and
per
stuff.
year. Yeah,
$4 million per year, a 2-year deal. I was like, wow, like nobody's probably heard of this. Nobody had heard of him. Right, last summer, hardly. I mean, he hadn't even won the job.
He was like QB3 at Tulane going into camp.
Going into the competition. So, and now he's getting paid more than basically anybody in the country. So, I thought I would visit there and meet with him and figure out exactly what happened. And it is a fascinating story. I did not expect sort of the story to turn into one about his family's financial struggles. I didn't realize that going in, that his family, his mom raised 3 kids by herself, or 4 kids by herself, and low income housing out in California. Had her car repossessed. We filed for bankruptcy at some point. Just they were in the low of the lows financially. And now, right, it's kind of, I wrote the story as a way to like sort of show, after learning all that, sort of show like this new era of college athletics, college sports, while it's criticized so much by those in power as being a Wild West and chaotic. Here is the positive of it, is that it can change a family's fortunes forever. And I talked to his agent from Young Money is it AAPP Sports?
Just say Lil Wayne's agency.
Lil Wayne's agency. And he walked me through like so I just kind of walk everybody through like how this all transpired last year, because it's sort of fascinating. Darian won the job in the 3-man battle in fall camp, just like 2 weeks before Tulane season started. Had a great September, and as what happens, right? Agents sort of get going and want to jockey to try to land these players. And he ended up signing with Lil Wayne's agency in October. And his agent, Noah Reisfeld, told me that he knew pretty much early on that there was a path here for him to sign this, perhaps the most lucrative college football contract for a player ever. And part of that was, as we mentioned sort of earlier about like the front loading that was happening before this new enforcement entity started. All these schools were kind of jockeying, scrambling to build a roster with regulation free, sort of no rules. And so that meant prices were skyrocketing. And that's sort of what happened here. And they ended up signing a deal that while the details weren't specifically revealed to me, I think the $4 million figure is pretty close to real for each year for those 2 years, which shocked me at first. I didn't realize that it was that much. But then Manny Diaz although he didn't confirm the number, he put the number in perspective for me, which I thought was really interesting. Of that, look, college is going to operate sort of on the same lines as pro ball when it comes to percentages you dedicate to a position of your pool, right? And I think Open Doors just came out with some numbers on that 18 or anywhere from 15 to 25% of rev shares being spent on the quarterback position, with most of that being spent on the starter. If you do the math, that's about anywhere from $2 to $5 million on the quarterback position, and probably at least a majority of that, again, to the starter. So it makes some sense.
And I noticed in those numbers, Ross, the ACC and the Big 12 are spending more on quarterbacks percentage-wise than the SEC and the Big 10, probably to keep those guys from going to the SEC and the Big 10. Like, you have to give them a little premium to keep them from picking a Big 2 conference school.
That chart was fascinating, right. And I don't want to derail the subject because I want to talk about Mensah, but there's so many interesting things about the difference in the value that is being ascribed financially to different position groups. Andy, I think you and I talked about this over text.
SEC's paying the most for D-line.
Just saying, guys. Might want to look into that. Anyway, I love a quote that tells the story. I think you've got several in here, but it's real simple if you get down into it, Ross, where it says, "My kids watch me crawl out of that hole. When you're stuck in poverty, all I wanted to do was get out of that poverty. That's it. That's all." There's a nice you've got a little piece in here where say, hey, like, you know what?
That's Darian's mom.
Yeah, that's Naomi. She's now in a studio apartment. They have a money manager. They got bankers. They got people. This kind of ties back into what we were talking about earlier, where you had a shift in philosophy over the years, or what was right, what was wrong. Guys, just the amount of quarterbacks that make it to the first round of the NFL draft, which is an infinitesimal amount, right? Just so tiny. Only half of those even make it to a second contract. And the reason why a second contract is important is that's your life-changing generational money for a family. So this is, I kind of want to sit with this for a second, because we've talked so much about how money's changing college sports in a very alarmist way. But this kid, if he blows his knee out in 2 weeks, if he's just mid-level, if he just ends up as a backup in the league for 2 years, has enough wealth now to fundamentally change his family forever, provided that it is well managed.
I want to point out, like, Godfrey, you and I have kids. we're in very stable situations, 2-parent homes, make decent money. It's really freaking hard to raise kids.
Dude.
Even when you have all the advantages in the world, which we do. What this lady did, and Ross, you pointed out in the story, not only did she raise her own 3 biological children, she had an ex-husband who had brought another child into their marriage. And when the marriage dissolved, she kept raising the kid like as her own. Like, so 4 children by yourself in dire financial straits. Like, I cannot even imagine the daily level of stress and the daily level of how much you have to just work to make sure everybody's breathing still.
And she obviously needed a lot of help with this. Her father and her sister and her sister's husband helped a lot. Bought cleats for Darian. Took him to games. His sister, by the way, then interesting kind of side story. His sister Grace is a soccer player at Oregon, on the women's soccer team there at Oregon, and they're twins, and they're very close. And so they were, all the family members and even the neighborhood parents would take them to school and games. And so she had sort of this at least a little bit of a support system to help her, but it sounded like a grind for sure. And she sounded, when talking to her, it sort of sounded like a woman who never thought she would get out of all that. Like when
Damn.
she we had it was an hour-long conversation, and I think 3 different times or so, right, she had to stop and pause to break down emotionally, because I don't think she had really talked to anybody, because it just happened, right? He became a millionaire in January. Before that, he had hardly no money to his name, and he became a multi-millionaire.
She's been grinding as a parent for 20 years.
Yeah. And
this all happened within the last 9 months.
Right.
The psychological and emotional patterning, if you don't grow up with wealth, or even at the mid sort of, like whatever the middle class is anymore, you don't lose that overnight. That's gonna be her mindset for the rest of her life, which is why you probably caught her in such an emotional state, Ross. I think it's brutal. I want to shout out a couple of coaches here. One, the now Houston coaching staff identifying Mensah, right? I mean,
Willie Fritz,
from your story.
This
they kind of pulled him out of the
Summerall
pile.
didn't bring him from Troy. Willie Fritz signed him. He was on the roster when Summerall got there.
Yeah, kind of pulled him out of the pile, right, Ross?
Yeah, I know. Yeah, so Tulane's son, Willie Fritz's son, Wes, was on staff with him there. He was their general manager, and they're now both at Houston doing similar things, head coach and general manager. And Wes Fritz, Willie's son, sort of found him, and he doesn't. I interviewed him. He didn't remember exactly like how he found him. He just remembers seeing him on lists, and then he saw maybe on social media just a couple of recordings, of Mensah sort of running around and throwing, and he's like, well, this is interesting. And he was a high academic kid to get into Tulane. Obviously, they have pretty high standards. So they flew out there. And Mensah was like, it's a lot of this I didn't include in the story, so it's interesting. But Mensah was, when they landed and met with him, they could tell he had no clue how recruiting worked. No clue. This was his senior year of high school. And he was in his senior year. It had gotten to that point. He had 0 offers. He was not going to play college ball potentially. And so he had no clue how recruiting worked, commitments and all this stuff. So it was interesting hearing Wes Fritz sort of tell the story. And then they offered him. And then he got a flood, quote, of offers from Lindenwood and Idaho State, followed Tulane in their offers. But Wes Fritz, I think I included this in the story, said that Lindenwood and Idaho State were probably like, is this Tulane offer real? Is this kid really? Because, again, he doesn't have the strongest arm. In fact, there are plenty of people on, Malik Murphy, they basically, and we didn't talk about this, Andy, but you mentioned it a little bit, Tulane or Duke, pushed out Malik Murphy. That happens all the time, right? It was just like, hey, we're going to bring in this other guy. If you want to stay, that's fine, right? But we're bringing in this other guy, and that was sort of the plan. And so anyway, so Malik Murphy has way stronger of an arm, right? A lot of people at Tulane that Darian Mensah breed out had way stronger of an arm. We're bigger, we're faster. but there is some intangibles about this kid, and it's instinctive. It's his pocket presence. It's his escapability, his accuracy, all the things. And he's just like really, really sharp.
He is great. If you watch this Tulane film, he is great at when pressure flushes him out of the pocket. He can move around, but he is not looking to just scramble. He will move around behind the line of scrimmage, find an open spot, reset himself, and figure out exactly who's wide open. It happened again and again and again last year at Tulane. And there are not many people in the world who can mentally process like that. And that's why he was so sought after.
Another thing that stands out in your story, Ross, I'm noticing a trend amongst head coaches who are considered the next big thing, the next big class of coaches. John Summerall has a quote in here. It reminds me a lot of the way Kenny Dillingham has been talking at Arizona State as well. I think you had it pretty high up here. It says, in my career, I've left jobs for more money. That's it. And he's, there's more to the quote, but the financials have become so great. How does a guy say no? Contrast that, guys, with the various other coaches. And I don't have one off the top of my head, Andy, you might, that I could use as to demonize here, who have said, all kids are looking for, it's an instant gratification society. We just got done talking about the life-changing, generational wealth-changing moment for a guy who you guys just said doesn't have as strong an arm for elite college play, which means this guy's probably not going to be winning any Super Bowls 10 years from now. This is why it's so fundamentally important that we do this. And I also love the idea that Summerall and these other coaches are just putting it out front and saying, hey, this is okay. This is part of the function. This is what we've
been doing forever. Yes.
Yes. This is the function of college sports. And by the way, this is how we built American capitalism. And that's okay. Let's move on from the pearl clutch.
I'll point out that Kenny Dillingham and John Summerall, what do they have in common? They're in their 30s.
Yeah.
They're going to be doing this.
There's something to that, right?
For 25 more years. So complaining about the system that will probably exist for the remainder of your career is probably not very smart. The coaches who are complaining are all people who are not going to work in college football anymore in 5 years.
Yeah, it's a back in my day mentality, and they'd rather rage against the dying of the light than try and figure out a way to shine it forward. I didn't mean to get so poetic, sorry.
Thank you, Dylan Thomas. You know, that's a villanelle. Great villanelle. 14 lines, 3 quatrains and a couplet.
I don't know. We can do
Andy,
a poetry
what are you
section.
talking about?
We could do a poetry section.
Oh, no, please. Godfrey, no.
Come on, Ross.
Hey, we're talking about Duke here. Duke's playing Illinois this week. I can't wait to see that game because Illinois obviously brought everybody back from a very good team last year, except for their 2 best receivers, but they've also replenished that through the transfer portal. So Luke Altmaier versus Darian Mensah, Brett Bielema versus Manny Diaz, going to be a lot of fun. We got to take a pause, though, and when we come back, we failed you last week. We failed you. We all gave you a game
we
that we felt really good about.
We warned you.
We warned them. We did warn them.
Yeah, we were all wrong.
We did warn you. Don't take this advice.
There's no sports book logo floating up, guys. There's a reason for that.
Hey, we're making it up to you this week.
Oh, crap.
That is my... Okay, I'm not going to promise anything.
Yeah, please don't.
Our picks are next. Welcome back to the College Football Enquirer, where, we warned you that we're not the best at picking games, but we are still going to soldier forward, even though we went 0-3 last week. Each of us gave you a game that we felt really good about. We are tempted to call this segment I've Got a Feeling. I don't know if that's the best name, especially if we're going to be wrong all the time. But let's get some right, and then we can workshop the name. Gentlemen, 1 game each. What do you have a very strong feeling about? We'll start with you, Stephen Godfrey.
Okay. I feel very, very conflicted about my pick, but again, I'm approaching this from a level of interest. One of the worst things.
Can I peel back the curtain a little bit?
Yes, sir. Okay.
Because before we started recording, you were talking to our producer TJ, and you said, "I think I'm going to flip the pick," and then 30 seconds later, you're like, "I'm not going to flip the pick."
Yeah. No. That is because I approach things from a place of interest and not certainty, because I would rather ask a question than try and deliver something that may or may not be true. But here's what I'm interested in. Fresno State going to Oregon State this weekend. Oregon State, Fresno State, how close are they in terms of program value right now?
Is this your second consecutive Fresno State? No, San Jose State last week. Okay.
What I'm doing is I'm doing G5 teams in the Pacific time zone because, damn it, I'm giving the largest audience, what they want in America. Those are the kind of games we're all talking about. With the dissolution, nuclear implosion of the Pac-12, these two schools have become kind of fascinating because they once upon a time had Power 5 budgets and rosters and recruiting, and yet you also have always had this sort of upper class of the G5 out west. Fresno State, historically one of these programs. Yes, I know that they have a first-year head coach in Matt Ince, formerly of North Dakota State and USC. I'm interested because Oregon State's a nice case study now, year 2 minus Jonathan Smith. Smith goes to Michigan State, not this past cycle, but the cycle before it. He takes 19 starters with him off of a very good team, but no one ever felt like they or Washington State could really sustain the power level. It's just a numbers game, right? I want to see how close these teams are to each other. Now, the comparative analysis thing that's very confusing for me is we're under or overreacting to almost everything that happens in the first 2 weeks, right? So Fresno State in week 0 gets walloped by Kansas and then really kind of puts it to what we thought was a decent Georgia Southern team in the second half last week. How am I reacting to that? Oregon State has Malik Murphy, didn't look fantastic against California by any stretch. I was kind of surprised by the result of that game, to be honest. They have some nice pieces. The running back, Hankerson, the wide receiver, Walker, they stayed on. They did not transfer out this past cycle. They're both projected. My buddy Bill C's S&P Plus, SP Plus, he took the and out. Oregon State around 73, Fresno State around 89. I picked Fresno State for purposes of our graphic, shout out TJ, as the upset, the 3.5 dog going on the road. I'm just curious here how close these teams are in on-field value as it represents what we do in breaking apart conferences and how teams can respond to all the off-field things. I think these teams are about equal is what I think. Now, one of them's going to win by 21 or 28 or something. Screw this up.
Well, what's it going to be?
Fresno State.
Yeah,
but I don't feel good about it. I don't feel good about it at all.
I was waiting for you to make your pick, your actual pick. He didn't want to do it, Andy. We don't want to lose again. None of us.
No, I'm gonna lose again. By the way, EJ Warner, son of Kurt, formerly of Temple, now out there in Fresno. So,
all right, Ross.
Yes, this week we haven't kind of talked about it. We have all these other issues going on, but like this week is maybe some would think is kind of a dud, right?
Bad.
Like, but there's a lot of like geographic sort of rivalries this week, and there could be really fun, I think, and intense, like SMU Baylor, and then the one I'm about to pick, which is Kansas Missouri, obviously, which if you spent any time up there. Those people, the border war, will say that is the most intense rivalry in the country. Here's the reason, and they'll show you,
back to
the Civil War.
Yeah, yes, they fought a war.
They'll show you all that.
They fought a war.
Yeah. Yes,
not the Civil War. Those two states fought a war.
Kind of the one that helps. Yeah. One of the things that helped set up the Civil War, where Missouri was the South and Kansas was the North, and it was basically the dividing line.
Yeah, it's the closest we have to like North Ireland. It is nasty, y'all.
It is nasty. So, so it shocked me because if any rivalry like this, I think usually the games are tight and close. So it really did surprise me when I saw that Kansas was getting 6.5, even though they're on the road at Missouri. So I like the Jayhawks this year. I think it was 5 games last year, or maybe 6 games. They lost every one of them, despite having a fourth quarter lead. They blew, I think, 5 or 6 fourth quarter leads. Jalen Daniels at quarterback, right? Really electric player. I think they go in and do enough, certainly, to cover the 6.5 against Missouri if they don't just win outright.
I had a tough time picking that game, Ross, because I'm a massive Lance Leipold fan. Like, the man's a miracle worker.
Yeah.
But I think Eli Drinkwitz has made the baseline expectation at Missouri so much higher than it was before, and has done such a good job roster building. I'm wondering, does Missouri just have significantly more talent? So that's why on my On 3 show, I did pick Missouri to cover, but I remember I had the same reaction as you when I saw the line, because I was like, I was assuming this was going to be like Missouri by 3.5.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of points.
If a coach can be under the radar in the Southeastern Conference, like a coach, you're like nationally, he's under the radar and still be in the SEC, it's Eli Drinkwitz.
Yeah. Now they have the easiest draw in the SEC again this year. I don't care. Like, it's Missouri. It's a hard place to win historically. And I always thought, Gary Pinkel, we never gave enough credit to. And every year that got us further away from what Gary Pinkel did, I appreciated him more.
Yeah.
But now you see Eli Drinkwitz doing this, and it's a pretty amazing job. And another thing to point out about this, Ross, this is the first meeting between these two teams since Missouri left the Big 12. The last time they played was 2011, which was Missouri's last year in the Big 12. So
was it really?
Yes.
Wow, they've gone that long. That's crazy.
Big deal that this rivalry is coming back. And so very excited about that. In the same vein, I am picking my game because it has been 44 years in the making. 44 years is how long Arkansas State has played football. They have never gotten a chance to play the Arkansas Razorbacks. That changes on Saturday in Little Rock. This is a massive game for Arkansas State. This is a dangerous game for Arkansas. There's a reason that Arkansas would never schedule Arkansas State.
Yeah, they don't play it, right? Yeah, that's right.
Yes. So Butch Jones, who everybody knows as the former Tennessee coach, brick by brick, he is the Red Wolves coach. They're coming off a season opening win. Sam Pittman, we've talked about, the Arkansas coach, perpetually on the hot seat, hell of a guy, former O-line coach, one of the greatest people you'll meet in the coaching business. I cannot wait for this game. What makes this so interesting is the spread. The spread in this game is Arkansas by 23.5. Now, if you know some people who make power ratings,
work in the desert,
which I might, I asked them, can you send me your sheet for the Arkansas State game? And the power rating projection for this game is something like Arkansas by 14. But the line is Arkansas by 23.5. That, ladies and gentlemen, is a market inefficiency.
Yeah.
I will take the Red Wolves to cover because I get more than 3 touchdowns. I don't think they're going to win. I don't care.
No.
Cover. Good teams win. Great teams cover.
If you've never watched Arkansas State or you're just not that familiar with the G5, they have a quarterback named Jalen Rayner. Really, really fun player to watch. Really, really fun player to watch. And also has stuck it out through the rebuilding process there. Kind of thought maybe he's undersized. Maybe that kept him out of consideration from some other schools. But Arkansas State is quietly rebuilding. They're doing things at scale that other major programs are. They have really nice facilities. Like they're doing it as well as you can at that level right now.
They are going to treat this like the Super Bowl, the NBA Finals, the World Series, and the World Cup Final all rolled into one. This is the biggest game in the history of Arkansas State football. It is not lost on those people. War Memorial Stadium in Little Rock is going to be a scene this weekend. So we shall see what happens, but I will take the Red Wolves to cover. Take it to the bank. No. Lock of the week. No. Can't do it.
Ross, you mentioned it's a bad schedule.
I got a feeling.
Yeah,
that's all. Not lock of the week. Just
and my feelings are conflicted. It is not an ideal schedule. It's not a marquee schedule. There are sleepers in here. I want to very quickly. Houston at Rice. Rice won last week. First game installing a modified gun option. All right.
Scott Abel comes from Davidson.
Yes.
Triple option. I'm here for all of your triple option based offenses, whether it's Jamie Chadwell at Liberty, whether it's the go-go with Brendan Marion at Sacramento State. Yes, Rice beat Louisiana last week, and I don't think you got to be pretty deep into the G5 lore to realize how big of a deal that is, but that is a very big deal.
Ross, you'll appreciate this. My friend Holly Anderson, the line of the week was, in historic first, Cajuns struggle with Rice. Friday night. James Madison at Louisville. You don't have to watch the NFL, okay? The government won't come get you yet if you don't watch the NFL. James Madison at Louisville. It will be a good game. 2 nerd revenge games, sort of. BC, Michigan State, Vandy, Virginia Tech. I would venture those will be interesting to watch. I'm going to do this really fast. I'm not going to break them down. And then last, UNLV could start 3-0. They're hosting UCLA.
Yes.
Dan Mullen
one of their
get back to a
defenders
big
called
job
out
fast.
Nico.
Yes.
Yeah, we saw the struggles that UCLA's had.
And
too,
guys,
so.
if you were a Tennessee fan and you're like, oh, we're playing ETSU this weekend, Joey did fine last week, we're kind of cruising, you want some Schadenfreude, that's later in the day, you tune in for UCLA UNLV because they could potentially start 0-2, UNLV could start 3-0.
Yeah, it is crazy how many like Arkansas State's games we have this week. South Carolina, South Carolina State, South Florida, which actually that might
That's
be
a good game, yeah.
quite interesting.
Well,
that one could, and Louisiana Tech and LSU play as well.
Yeah, I would say South Florida is interesting in as much as I would like to see South Florida remain competitive 2 quarters plus, and I very much like Florida this year. So
I'm very interested to see how Florida deals with Byron Brown. Caleb Banks, their best defensive tackle, missed last week. This is Florida's best defensive tackle. It seems like they're trying to hold him out until they play LSU next week. They'd like to keep him, but USF obviously will be a much bigger challenge than Long Island, which is their season opener. But also, I do think people might be overrating USF's win against Boise State a bit. Yeah. I'm not sure Boise State is as good as everybody thinks.
I was one of those people. To jump back in, Virginia Tech, it's close to must win. If you're going to bowl this year, if you're going to survive everything we talked about with that program, it is close to must win hosting Vanderbilt at home. These are strange sentences
I'm not sure I want
loud.
Diego Pavia coming into my house if I have to win a game. That's a tough spot.
Yeah. Big hot seat there. Too.
Would like to see something out of Childs this weekend for Michigan State, too. You don't want to lose 2 in a row to BC. The rebuilding schedule, we got to start paying attention to the rebuilding schedule at Michigan State under Smith. I know it's going to take a while, but how long do we tolerate a while for?
Also, new AD.
Yep.
Always changes the math.
J-Bat making that money move.
We'd be remiss if we didn't mention Iowa State, too.
Sign-off game.
There you go.
Yeah.
We did mention it. We said that Jamie Pollard is welcoming Dave Portnoy with open arms.
Yeah, that's right.
Yes, right. Rocco Becht versus Mark Gronowski.
Yeah, it's a fun one.
I'm not touching this because every year that I've ever worked in college football media and I've got Iowa State is exciting or I'm falling for this trap of like, oh man, Iowa State, Big 12 title contender. I think I've said it on the show twice already, coming off the K-State game especially. They go to Iowa and find a way to score like 7.2 or 6.3 in some disgusting defensive loss. So I'm staying off this because I like Iowa State so much.
So on my On3 show, I picked Iowa State to cover the 3.5, and my co-host Ari Wasserman pointed out that Iowa State has not won in this series by more than 3 points since 2005.
This is one of the most. There are certain rivalries right now across college football that have a kryptonite tendency here. There's a couple in the G5 I monitor. This in the power conferences, we can throw praise upon Matt Campbell, and I think we should, Andy. But damn, he's got to do something more against Iowa. He's got to.
And now's your chance, because I thought Gronowski coming from South Dakota State, Walter Payton Award winner in 2023, I thought he would suddenly make their offense competent looking, that they would have reasonably competent quarterback play. There must just be a force field around that program, because in their season opener, he looked like he had not thrown a pass in college before. And it was incredibly weird. Like, the guy's good. Like, we've seen him be really good at a high level.
See, I thought it was telling that he didn't transfer out with the rest of those guys to do the Wazoo thing. I thought that was interesting. Maybe it was just you're playing the market, whatever, for NIL, but I thought that was very telling.
Yeah, but Rocco Becht is good. We've seen him be good at this level. So why I picked Iowa State in that game to cover is because of Rocco Becht. Our producer TJ is calling an Iowa outright win, which I don't think that's a huge stretch. He is. He's calling.
I don't think that's a stretch either. I wouldn't be surprised at all if that happens. This is a huge game for like the Big 12, Big 10, the P2, other two game war sort of that we see going on, because I'm gonna be keeping up with that sort of all season, is how the power conferences fare against one another. SEC leads everybody right now after the first weekend at 4-2. Obviously, it's really early, but
isn't that deceptive though?
It is deceptive. Yeah, it is. And we have to wait. I think it's a small sample size. But one other thing, this is a huge weekend for the Big 12 in that regard.
Yes.
I think the Big 12 has 6 or 7 games against other power conferences.
Yeah,
Yes,
Arizona State headed to your alma mater.
Yeah.
They were using woefully
Get some
inadequate
cowbell.
cowbells to practice
Although
for Mississippi
Kenny
State.
Dillingham, there are plenty hotels that are not casinos within an hour of Stark Vegas, man. Come on.
What did
Listen,
he say?
Kenny, as a former Auburn assistant, knew exactly how to tee that one up.
Yeah.
This is not
Godfrey,
an
you didn't see
accident.
that one?
No,
'Cause
I've
you know
not
that
seen
area
one.
well.
I
So
do.
he
Yeah.
said there's no. He said they're having to stay like an hour and a half away
Okay.
because there's no hotel that's not a casino near Starkville.
You
which-
just stay in Tupelo.
Well, there's
like
a
everybody.
lovely Hampton Inn
Yeah.
right in Starkville,
Yeah.
and I'll tell
There's
you,
plenty in Columbus. There's plenty.
Just stay in Tupelo.
Usually
like
the away
there's
team
also
stays in Columbus or
brand new
Tupelo.
courtyard in Starkville as well. But the Hampton Inn in Starkville, the first time I ever was there, I had to pick up something at the front desk that someone from Mississippi State had left for me. This was the afternoon before Cam Newton and Auburn came to play them on a Thursday in 2010. And so I go into the lovely Hampton Inn and I pick up the envelope that is waiting for me at the desk. I walk back out, and what do I see? A Rolls Royce has pulled into the traffic circle.
Not many
at
of
the
those
Hampton
in
Inn.
Stark Vegas.
Cecil
And
Newton.
who should step out but Fred Smoot?
Yes. So I had, and I don't know what happened to it. I lost it. I'm so frustrated. I can't even figure out. There was a reader of mine years ago who made it for me. Smoot for Heisman. I used to have that on a T-shirt. Ross, I don't know where your age is exactly on this, but when I was in high school, I finished high school in Mississippi. And my senior year of high school, Smoot for Heisman bumper stickers, or no, maybe it was my freshman year of college, were everywhere because it was Fred Smoot versus Deuce McAllister for neither one of those was going to get actual Heisman play. But Fred Smoot is as close to an urban legend in Mississippi. Let me tell you, I have 5 Fred Smoot stories off the top of my head, 0 of which I can share on this podcast. Okay, that man is
those late '90s Mississippi State teams, the Jackie Sherrill, a couple of them really
baby.
good. Yeah, they had
Wayne
some,
Madkin.
they had some characters.
Yes,
no
sir.
socks, Jolie Dunn, the whole thing, man.
Absolutely.
That's
By the
probably
way,
the place we need to end it because we have
watch for
we've
State.
veered into late '90s interlocking MSU logo Mississippi State talk.
State could scare I think State is going to be better in that game than people realize. By the way,
I have picked them to cover in that game.
Yeah,
and not just because the cowbells were not adequate to simulate the noise.
Yeah,
but we'll find out. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll talk to you on Sunday.